Hello, everyone. It's Steve with Aptera Owners Club. Today, Aptera did an amendment to Form 1A, and that was released today, August 6th, 2022.
Hello everyone, nearly said my name, from Aussie Ideas Man, and I'm a bit jaded today. It's a cloudy and rainy day outside, and I've decided to make another video and not have my face in it at all, just like Steve from Aptera Owners Club. Now, it isn't August 6th, it's September 2nd. I just thought I'd see what I could say as I go through this one.
And it was pretty interesting, so I thought we'd kind of go over it together. All right, so as you can see, published today, August 16th, 2022. And basically, this is saying that they plan on offering more Class B common shares at a price of $10.50. I think the last round was $9.20, and then the round before that was like $8.80 or something like that. And before that, I think it was $3.80 or something. But now the new price is $10.50, and they're offering about 4 million shares, so that will be gross revenue about $41 million. So they're hoping to raise $41 million out of this, and I don't know when this is going to go active. They've submitted for it. They've done previous amendments to this where they were planning on releasing less shares, but it looks like they've now upped it to 4 million shares. And I don't know if this is going to go live soon.
Ali's talking pretty fast, but my first thought is that if Aptera will need to raise an additional $50 million to make it to production, why are they offering shares that only reach $41 million? Are they planning to be $9 million shy of what they need?
Or not. Currently, if you go to Aptera, it says our $9.20 investment round has concluded. Please stay tuned. So I don't know when they're going to change this to let people get in on $10.50. So I think it's going to happen pretty soon because they do need the money. And so I think we will see that page update and people will be able to invest at $10.50. Now, disclaimer, I'm not a financial analyst or a financial professional. This is not investment advice. This is just information.
My disclaimer, I'm not a financial analyst either, and I'm certainly not giving any advice, but I do analyse the facts. And so far, if you need $50 million to stay in production and you ask for $41 million, you're setting yourself up for a failure. That's a fact.
And so this is the interesting thing. So a maximum of 4 million shares, roughly 3.9 million shares, 4 million shares will be offered. Currently, they have 55,714,810 shares of Class A common stock. This was the stock that was given to the initial investors and to the founders of the company. And then this is the amount of Class B stock. This is the stock that we all bought through the previous offerings. And so after they add 4 million to this, it will look like this. They'll have 55 million of Class A and 11.5 million of Class B and 10.5, and there'll be a minimum investment amount of about 1,000, which is what it was before too. And then I kind of wanted to know who owns this 55 million shares of stock, and here it is. So these are the people so if you add this up, this is 55,700,000 something shares. Then Chris Anthony and Steve Fambro own 15 million shares each. I think this is a slight typo. This should be 26.92, and this is 26.92 because they are the same, and they are less than this. So it's not 29.62. This is 26.92, so a little typo there. So you look at this, and at $10 a share, these things are theoretically worth $150 million. So Chris and Steve, on paper, theoretically, if this is actually worth $10.50, have about $150 million. So that's not bad.
Not bad, $150 million, but how on earth do they have it? They start a company, they say they got X amount of shares, and by extrapolating the value of a few investors bringing in real money, they then say their shares are worth $150 million. But have they really put in $150 million worth? It just doesn't make sense to me. Did they put in $150 million of their own money, these three people, to get those shares? Or is there something fishy going on?
Of course, this is just it's unrealized, so it depends on whether they actually go IPO, actually or sell to another company and experience some kind of liquidity event. Then they'll realize these gains. If the company goes bankrupt, well, it's worth nothing.
Oh, well, that explains it. If the company goes bankrupt, it's worth nothing. Well, it was nothing then. It was nothing input because, well, they would have to spend $150 million plus the value of the investment money to go bankrupt. Bankrupt means they've got no money left. So in order to go bankrupt, if that 150 was as real as the investor's money, both those components would have to be spent to go bankrupt. And then it would be worth nothing and they would have lost their $150 million. But at the moment, Steve's trying to say the money's somehow of no value. And I think it is. I think all of this is just a crock. I, I don't understand it. So if there are any people with investment savvy out there, I'd like that explained in the comments, please.
So just like if you invest in this stock now, unless there's a liquidity event such as going IPO or them being bought out by a bigger company, then your shares are essentially worthless. There's no secondary market. Like no, you can't really sell it to anyone else.
Well, there you go. If going IPO turns pretend money that's ethereal, into reality, then they should have gone IPO as soon as possible. So why haven't they? Also, if a company buys them out, I guess they buy the shares at the $150 million value plus the investor's shares as well. So pays that money to buy them out, then yes, you have value in your shares. But what are the chances of Aptera being bought out by anybody? Nobody likes it. It failed one time and companies are not interested in it. China is supposed to have had the intellectual property for nearly a decade, and if China doesn't do anything with it, who's going to buy it?
At least it's very difficult to. So if you invest in them right now, it depends on one of these liquidity events happening. So they don't have to follow a lot of these accounting and reporting rules and auditing rules. So they're not, quote, as safe as, established companies.
Definitely not.
Then they talk about risks related to our business and industry and risks related to our securities, and they go over them one by one here. So we can kind of peruse it, okay? So we have a limited operating history upon which you can evaluate our performance and have not yet generated revenues or profits. Accordingly, our prospects must be considered in light of that and any new company encounter. So yeah, that's true. They haven't made any money. They haven't produced a production car. And so we can't evaluate their performance as a company that produces and sells actual products.
They not only haven't produced anything, a while back I discovered they'd spent about $30 million of real money in setting up supply agreements with about 5 different suppliers. And to date, we have no evidence that any supplies have been received. These companies are mostly overseas, but it really doesn't matter so long as they are able to make money disappear. And this is what is a big concern to me.
But the company lacks significant working capital and has only recently commenced operations. We will incur significant additional costs before significant revenue is achieved. These matters raise substantial doubt that the company's ability to continue as a going concern. So they're saying we don't have that much money. We will have to spend way more money before we can get to production and generate money. And because of that, our ability to continue as a going concern, so continue as a financially stable company, is in substantial doubt. The company plans to raise significantly more capital and future fundraising, including offering equity at a discount to the price offered in this offering. So they are going to plan to sell shares to some people at less than the cost that they're selling it to people in this offering. So at less than $10.50 a share. This is what I figure is happening. If someone who has a large amount of money wants to invest in them, say someone says, "Oh, I want to invest 50 million into you guys," and they actually kind of need someone to do that. because the chance of raising 41 million through this offering from small investors, kind of iffy. Um, but let's say someone was going to say, I can give you guys $50 million, but I don't want to pay $10.50 a share. I want to pay less, $8 a share or something like that. Then they'll probably go for it. They'll probably go for it. And so, and then that will dilute our shares. Those of us small investors, it'll dilute our shares. It'll make our shares less valuable. Okay, so we know that.
It'll make the people that have actually put in real money less valuable. That means they're losing it, aren't they? If they pay $10 for their shares, then in this instance, if somebody buys at a discounted price and they agree to it, their shares can only go down to, say, $8, and they've lost $2 real. Or multiply that out in the thousands for the big investors. They have lost thousands of dollars if this occurs. Doesn't matter to the people that have those $150 million worth of shares because it's imaginary money anyway, by the looks of it.
Aptera operates in a highly competitive market. This is yet another typo. They called it Aperta, which obviously it's Aptera. We have filed for 5 patents. So this is outdated language. They have filed for 9 patents, actually. So this is kind of outdated.
Well, this is interesting. They've had some incredibly poor typos, and now they haven't even managed to tell the government how many patents they have. But the more interesting thing is that they don't have patents at all. They have applications for patents. All these patents may never occur. All these applications may be Mickey Mouse. They may be things that don't work and will be knocked back because they don't work, but it just looks good. We've got 9, well, they say 5, and Steve says 9 patent applications.
Again, they can't spell Aptera correctly. So I
Third
hope
one,
someone's watching this from Aptera and fixes these typos. It's a little embarrassing. The offering price of our securities has been arbitrarily determined. Yes, there's no like market to determine the actual price. They've just kind of done some internal analysis and decided $10.50 makes sense. At $10.50, they're valuing the company right now at over $500 million.
well, here's something that is unusual to me. He was saying they had $155 million worth of shares and that there was about, I think, $7 million worth of investment, which is real money, that one. And they hope to get $41 million worth of investment, real money. So that would make 7 and 41's $48 million worth of real money and $155 million worth of pretend money. And now they're worth, or they say they're worth $500 million. How can you be worth $500 million if they've got 155 million in pretend money and 7 million in real money and the hope to get 41 million more in real money? They are not within cooey of that amount. How can they say they're worth over $500 million? Where's that money? They're renting buildings. They've got no more than 3.5 prototypes and they don't work. None of them close to being a real vehicle. None of them close to being production able. So, aside from renting buildings, which is a liability, not an asset, these handful of fake prototypes, they've got liabilities through somewhere, I don't know, around 80 staff. That's liabilities. They got liabilities in making these $30 million investments. In fact, how do they make $30 million investments with only $7 million worth of real money? How are they paying it with the pretend money that the 155 million is? It just seems like $500 million has to be more pretend money and is plucked out of nowhere, thin air.
Which seems like a low thing based on the price of EV stocks about a year ago, but right now might be a little optimistic. Back when Rivian was selling for $80 billion, you're like, well, maybe Aptera is worth $500 million. I don't know if that's the case anymore.
You can't compare what some other company does and say, well, then maybe this company's bona fide. That makes no sense at all.
But the securities market is tough right now. You can't resell any shares that you get. They have to experience a liquidity event, which is being bought out by a bigger company or going IPO. If one of those two things doesn't happen, Your stock is worthless. It's just paper. It's not worth anything.
That's interesting. The real money, this, what is it, $7 million that has been acquired, is worthless. That's amazing.
And so we are trusting them to make the right decisions with basically the money you invest. If you don't trust them, you probably should not invest in this.
You probably should not trust them. You just have a listen to everything they've said since they reformed and just judge for yourself how many of those things that they have said have been true. Lots of them have been deceptions and lies.
Our executive officers and directors may have potential conflict of interest arising from outside business activities. I think they all have to say stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's what they actually said last time. In version 1, they said, oh, we just left because we thought we'd like to do something different. Well, just might happen again.
Oh, they have broad discretion how they use it. We know that. They're not paying in dividends, so you're not going to get dividends.
You're not going to get dividends. Wow.
The company intends to amend its certificate of portion, which would create a series of preferred stock with rights superior to the common stock offered in this offering, including liquidation preference. Okay, so this preferred stock is the stock that they're selling to the accredited investors. So accredited investors, remember those are the people that have like, I think make over $250,000 a year and have like over $1 million in assets outside of their primary residence. So that those preferred stocks, so if you invest in those, if you get the preferred stock, what happens is, let's say they have to close down shop and they liquidate their assets. Well, if they liquidate their assets, those people with preferred stock would get some money back before the common stock people get their money back.
Liquidate their assets. So that means they sell off 3.5 prototypes that nobody can do anything with. They might get maybe less than $1,000 for the lot in total because they really are useless. And they sell off the parts that are hanging around the edges of the rented properties, which are not much. Again, they might get another $1,000 for that at an auction. These sorts of things go off very cheaply. What have they got to liquidate? If they liquidated, there's nothing to sell off. There's no big fire sale of anything that's worth any money. So the $7 million that's from investors wouldn't matter if you were an accredited investor. You would not get 2 cents in the dollar.
All right, so subscription agreements, and this is all not too interesting. Okay, the company's board of investors may require stockholders to participate in future events. So they're saying that if they decide to sell their assets, you have to sell your stock to them. Like if they decide to get bought out by a company, you can't say, no, I don't want to get bought out. No, you have to follow along. Then it talks about dilution, which that just means that if you
Hang on. What would a company buy them for? Certainly, a company, if it wanted to pay for their assets, would only be paying a couple of $1,000s because that's all there is in assets. It's a different matter if they want to buy the real money, then they'd at least buy $7 million worth. But what company's going to buy the imaginary 155 million on top of that? There's nothing there to sell to any company.
and then they're talking about their suppliers. So we know about their Cherry Automotive. So they are going to get some technical services from them and a licensing agreement for intellectual property. So they're paying them $2 million to license some technology from them. We still don't know what that technology is. Yeah, we don't know if it's their self-driving, safety pilot, their internals. I don't think it's their suspension. That doesn't make sense. It's not their motor technology. Maybe it's their charging. I doubt it's their battery technology. We just don't know. But they're licensing some intellectual property from Cherry. And then they have a licensing agreement with Alafe. They're paying them a licensing fee of $40 per motor. It goes into effect after they buy 20,000 motors, which is enough for 10,000 vehicles. And in addition, the company has a agreement with Red Viking for their AGVs and Yazaki for their internal wiring. And they talk about the environmental impact, which is good. They believe the market size is.
Didn't they also have some agreements with both EVA, I think it is, for battery supplies, and some Taiwanese battery supplier as well? How come they didn't make the document?
600,000 units per year. That's pretty optimistic. I think if they sell 20,000 a year, they'll be doing great, and 20,000 a year is more than they can produce initially anyway. So if they produce 20,000 a year and can consistently sell 20,000 a year, I think they'll be very profitable and doing well.
So Steve from Aptera Owners Club is saying that these people that are writing the documents from Aptera, official documents, are stretching it. Wow. I guess Steve might be better at the business than they are.
Um, Currently, they have 89 full time employees and 14 part time employees. They don't have any pension, annuity, profit sharing. I'm sure they have stock options because almost all startups, that's how they attract talent.
But hang on a sec. Wasn't there something at the start that said these were the stockholders? If they were giving stock options to the employees, wouldn't they have to name them at the top where they said these are the stockholders? Obviously, the employees, none of them have any stock because that was covered.
So these are their operating expenses. So they had a $7 million increase in general selling and administrative expenses and an $8 million increase in research and development expenses. So their operating expenses have gone up significantly in 2021 over 2020. And we know they've hired more people in 2022. So it's going to be even higher in 2022. So their cash burn rate, I'm sure, is even higher now, and then that's before they've even started trying to produce vehicles. So their cash burn is going to be fairly significant.
Yeah, there's $15 million increase. Probably since I had heard that they'd spent about $30 million on these supply agreements. So, yeah, the cash burn is amazing. And how much did they have in cash? I think at the start it was $7 million, wasn't it? It's really hard to figure out, but it looks like nearly 8 million shares, not dollars. But if they're valued at, I don't know, what would they be valued at? A lot of these were sold for less than a dollar. Then they were sold for incremental amounts up to this 10.50 that they've never sold for. I think it was $9 something was the highest ones they sold for. So we've got nearly 8 million shares sold at all sorts of varying prices between under a dollar to just over $9. And so that is the real money. And that amount of shares, well, really, that should be somewhere around $70 million value. I've been confusing shares with dollars, so maybe they have picked up $70 million in real money, something like that.
So this is the important number. They have $19 million cash on hand. And since 2021, so at this time they had 19 million and they raised an additional 15 million. Okay.
Well, this is very different to what I said. I just roughly worked out that because of shares sold, that real money brought in was about 70 million. And now they've got under $20 million left. They would have had to have burnt $50 million. Whereas all I knew about was, well, no, they did burn about 30, and then they said they had a huge increase in the burn recently. I think another 15. That's 45 million. So that does add up, doesn't it? But boy, these people are really out of money. And of course, they have to name what money they have. So where is the $155 million of the imaginary money? It's got to be imaginary, doesn't it?
You'll see a timeline later on, oh, right here at the bottom of this thing, and you'll see that that's like an old timeline. That's totally different than this timeline. And then it says, as a result of the above, the company will experience increased spending across the organization, including general selling and administrative, as well as research and development expenses. So they're saying their cash burn is going to go up, which is true. All right. So here, see, this is our 12-month plan. This is old. This is their old plan. And you can see this was their plan back in 2021.
So they're using an old plan. My goodness.
They didn't amend it for this thing. I think this is copied and pasted from their previous annual report in 2021, in like early 2021. So they were planning on building their betas by the end of last year, by fall of 2021. So that didn't happen. And then deliver to a customer by the end of the year. And by end of year, they meant 2021. And then they were going to build out the facilities and ramp up production in 2022. As we know, that didn't happen. So now I think we can just delay all of this by 3 quarters to a year.
I'd say by 2 or 3 years, if they're even genuine. My doubts are that they're not even genuine. This is just a lot of snake oil for the government.
Here's how much they got paid. Steve Anthony, 211,000. Steve Fambro, 180,000. And James Burlingame, 181,000. Now they got a bunch of stock options on top of that, which are worth either a lot of money or worth no money, depending on how the company does. So you can make your own judgments about whether you think this is fair compensation or not. What I really want to know is how much money are they burning, and how much money do they have? Now, they said they have $20 million in cash at the end of 2021, and remember they raised another 14 million. So let's say that they have 34 million. And then if you look here, they have zero revenue, of course, because they're not selling anything. And operating expenses, 19 million. So in 2021, their operating expenses was 19 million, and they had 19 million. So they had about a year's worth of cash reserves. Now their total operating expenses are going to be much higher this year. They've hired more people, they leased more buildings this year, so this is going to go up. And then this is before they start trying to build out their production facility. I think that's going to cost a ton of money to build out their manufacturing facility. So their cash burn this year is going to be significant.
It looks like the cash burn is actually higher annually than the money coming in. This is heading for disaster.
We anticipate we will need at least $50 million in addition. So in addition to this and this, they need another 50 million. So they're planning to raise 40 million from this. They need to they need to completely have this thing totally bought out and get another 10 million from somewhere else, maybe from those preferred investors. But they need $50 million at least, because if you look at this balance sheet, they burned through 20 million last year. They're going to burn through way more this year. And they're going to need at least $50 million to make it into production. If they don't get $50 million, they're going to have a hard time making it to production.
Yep, that's amazing because early on in the piece, they were asking for investments saying this is going to happen. This is all rosy. They've got low production costs and it's easy to build and they're more efficient in everything they do. Now we're looking at the setup for what happened last time in the first iteration of Aptera, where even though the vehicle never proved it would work, they laid the blame squarely on lack of money. And what do you know? Deja vu. They're setting themselves up to lay the blame on lack of money. It's lack of money because they're spending it on supplies that they're not getting. It's just disappearing.
Will they find the capital to make it to production? That's the biggest question. Can they find $50 million from someone? They have to.
Well, since this old video, they have a grant promised by the California government for $21 million. That's going to keep them for nearly a year at the rate that they burn money. But also, they've opened up ordinary folks' investment round again because, well, that just indicates that they're going after big business failed. So, yeah, get more gullible fanboys to throw some money at them and try to make up, what is it, $28 million still? I wouldn't go near them with a barge pole.
If they don't find $50 million, we are probably not getting our cars. And those of us who invested probably aren't getting any money out of it.
Well, my line of thinking is if they don't make the cars work, you're probably not going to get your cars anyway.
But if they do get the 50 million and they do deliver a car, I think we're all going to be very happy. The investor is going to make a lot of money, and we're all going to be driving really cool cars.